I'm David Gadarian, and this is The Flip Story. And our guest today is Eric Levine, founder of StratEngine AI. We have a ton to cover in this episode as Eric has spent time with some of the most recognizable brands in the modern age, working in companies run by two of the most recognizable founders of the modern age. Today, he's building a multi-sided market for startups, business, and VCs by leaning into his greatest strength, being a world-class strategist. And he's agreed to join us as we explore how he's flipping his own story. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess kind of an easy place to start is where are you right now in terms of what is StratEngine AI and maybe just a kind of brief overview, and then we'll kind of work backwards to today.
Yeah, so StratEngine AI is an AI platform primarily for strategy consultants, but has strong use cases for business executives of all size. And basically, what it is it builds a strategy for you start to finish. So you enter the business context, any problem that you're trying to solve, and it'll do all the research, apply frameworks, full analysis with an implementation plan. And from there, if you work in a corporate environment, it'll build the decks for you and build the docs as well. So you don't have to spend all the time doing all of the manual labor that goes with strategy creation.
Amazing. That definitely plays into one of your superpowers. So we're going to be covering that soon enough. All right. So let's start kind of backwards because, you have a really neat background that you didn't quite. I look at folks like you, and sometimes it's like abundantly obvious. Like I can see exactly how somebody got to somewhere, and it kind of their lineage makes total sense in terms of a journey, and maybe yours does too. But um, perhaps it's a little bit more kind of varied. So let's kind of start. I know we spoke beforehand, and I'll spill the beans. You went to the University of Michigan. What'd you study there?
I studied philosophy and German. German was more so like a double major because it seems like the cool thing to do at the time, but philosophy was really my focus.
Okay. Did you manage to get to Germany?
Yeah, I had family in Germany, so I was homeschooled in German language, and so it was just an easy major to pick up and just check the box. Did it provide me any benefit double majoring? I don't really think so.
Right. I was going to say that feels almost unfair. All right. So why philosophy though? Because I think that's the piece that kind of speaks, and we're going to come back to that in a few different ways.
Yeah, so when I graduated high school and I started my college journey, I was an extremely tunnel visioned mathematical linear thinker. Math was my favorite subject. To me, there was only one right answer to everything that happened, and every decision. And so when I got to college, I always knew long term I would eventually go into business. And at Michigan, you apply to business school during your freshman year. So when the business school application came around, I really didn't want to go and I didn't want to get in because I wanted to take the 4 years at Michigan as an opportunity to actually learn something I was interested in and also break out of the boundaries that I was currently operating in. So I purposely bombed my business school application so that I could get rejected, get my parents off my back, be like, hey, this wasn't my decision. And then I found an interest in philosophy, which I found absolutely fascinating. It was really the ontological argument, which was whether God exists, that convinced me that this was something I wanted to pursue. And what it really taught me more than anything was how to think. So, philosophy as a practice, what it really does is it anything can be argued and every point of view can be as valid as any other.
Right.
So, but what it requires is for you to take a really ambiguous and complex problem and break it down into logical steps in an argument. And then you spend time in a philosophy argument debating those steps and the validity and whether they lead to another or whether they should or should not be included. And so that process really teaches you how to find what's relevant in an ambiguous problem, what's not, how to structure the thinking, and how to make an argument that can be convincing.
Okay. So math to philosophy. Do you do you think I happen to go to Ann Arbor as well, so I know that city pretty well. Do you think Ann Arbor played a role in you making that big a leap, or would you have done that no matter where you go to school? Is that an environment or a in you inner kind of questioning, kind of that curiosity, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've never actually thought about that. I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I've always been an insatiably intellectually curious person. My last therapist actually called that out and said she was fascinated by how curious I am. But I think what Michigan provided was an environment where they enabled and celebrated new ways of thinking and new ways to explore yourself and growth.
Right.
Whereas, had I gone to a more engineering school or a math and science focused school, it would have been a lot more like, I don't understand why you're not doing math and science. So I think it really provided a groundwork for me to think more laterally.
Okay. So you finish school, and like everybody, you got this pressure to go be something, do something. Um, this is where I think in your kind of journey sounds like you had a little bit of kind of traditional business, and then you go back to school, right?
Yeah. So when I graduated Michigan, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I
Okay.
mean, who the hell's going to hire a philosophy major straight out of college? Like, what kind of job do you go get? Like, I still don't know the answer to this day. Um, so the only thing that I could think to do was get an accounting degree, a master's in accounting. And I found a program at the University of North Carolina that specialized in taking liberal arts majors and teaching them accounting rather than taking business majors. So I attended that program and then became a public accountant at Deloitte for 3 years. And I'll say from day one, stepping on campus in my first class, I knew I didn't want to do accounting. So it was a 4 year journey, 1 year of school, 3 years of career of
Yeah.
just biting the bullet, gritting your teeth, and just trying to build that baseline of business experience and business knowledge. And accounting was good because it taught me how businesses are run from the financial point of view. Like, what do they look for? How do you read financial statements? How do you use financial statements to inform operations? But what happened was is after 3 years of public accounting, any job I tried to apply for or get, the only ones that would interview me were more accounting roles.
Right. You're trapped.
So I got pretty pigeonholed there.
Right.
And so the only way to get out of it was I had to roll the dice and go to business school, which I went to UCLA to do literally anything else.
Okay. So you go to UCLA, Anderson. It's a great school, great town. Spent some time in LA as well. Um, and Los Angeles does feel, in addition to going to school for that kind of reason, Los Angeles does have a lot of feel of you infinite possibility, massive horizon of potential. Were you feeling that, or was that just kind of happenstance that you were in this city that kind of natively has that? I mean, people go to LA not necessarily to go to UCLA, but they go to quote make it. I mean, that's kind of the DNA of the city.
Yeah. So I think for me, so I worked my accounting career started in LA. So I was already in LA when I
All
went to
right.
business school.
Okay. So you knew what you
And
were getting into.
yeah, and when I got that job, it was more of like, we have an office in every city. What city do you want to work out of? And so I picked LA because after those Michigan winters, I officially retired from cold weather, and never looked back, not doing it again. But also, LA always felt like home to me. It felt like the place I was the most relaxed and felt like most myself.
Yeah.
So it was really important for me, for my life outside of whatever career I was doing, to have that sense of home and relaxation. So that, I was 23, I wanted to become the best version of myself I could. And so I grew up in New Jersey, right outside of New York City, and that culture never really worked for me, where it's just grind, 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 and then just drink on weekends. And like, those were the only two things that you could do. And it was high stress, intense. And so LA just felt like a better place for me. And
Hmm.
I got a bit lucky that UCLA let me in, so I didn't actually have to move through that process. But to answer your question more directly, I definitely did feel in LA the sense of exploration and possibility because I live in Venice. So when like I go to the walk around the beach on like a Wednesday afternoon or something like that, it's packed, right?
Yep.
People, it's the land of non-traditional schedules. LA is an expensive city, so it really showed me that like there is a way to live a life that is non-traditional and be able to afford to live here. It's just a matter of figuring out how and what works for you in order to accomplish that.
So I want to come back to that. Actually, you mentioned something kind of interesting, resonated with me. You at 23, that feels young. You had mentioned you wanted to be the best version of yourself that you could be. Um, so you were aware of that at that kind of moment, and then it sounds like you leaned into that and you developed other parts of your quote portfolio, your life portfolio, your human portfolio to meet those moments.
Yeah, exactly. And this really started in high school, actually. Is in high school, I was a very shy and timid kid. I had friends, but it wasn't anything that I felt would be lifelong friends or people that really resonated with how I saw my life going later in life. So when I went to college, I was the only one from my high school that went to Michigan. So to me, it was fresh slate, clean
Right.
slate, fresh start. Um, and so I wanted to spend those 4 years working on becoming the version of myself where I saw my life going. And so when I eventually got to LA, it was more a continuation of that philosophy. I became whoever I became out of college, and life is a decades long journey. So at 23, I knew there was a lot further to go. And it was really important to me to best set myself up for success in terms of personal growth and identity. And LA was the place I felt I could do that the best.
Okay. I can buy that. That's and I think people come to that at different ages in their
Totally.
life. Some folks when they're, you know, 23, some way older. It's been me. I'm probably in the way older camp. So kind of
Totally. It's just, yeah, and it just kind of naturally happens. And then the other thing was LA was the first place I actually got to choose where I lived. Like childhood, you don't choose.
right,
College, you only get some choice and
right,
like all of that. So that was important to me.
right. And Ann Arbor's a pretty it's a pretty defined existence, right? I mean,
Exactly.
it's an awesome existence. I love Ann
Totally.
Arbor, but
Yeah.
it's definitely it's not I would say abundance of choice is not one of
No.
the bigger pieces. All right. So we're kind of getting some background here. We're going to start pacing up now. So now you go to Hyperloop. How'd you get that job? Was that something that you were like starting as like a financial analyst to then move into strategist, or was that you got there and then you saw strategy opportunity? What happens there? Because seems like a big pivot for you,
Yeah, it was a good question. So, the way I got there was I graduated UCLA without a job and I was unemployed for 6 months.
right?
Um, and that wasn't uncommon for my class, at least. And the strategy jobs I was looking for were really just looking for consultants. So I was back in this like half pigeonhole box of like, you don't have any consulting experience. We're not going to hire you for a strategy job. And they really weren't that popular. They're a lot more popular now.
Right.
So I needed to find a job that leveraged my background as an accountant that wasn't accounting, and I could have enough flexibility to eventually grow that role into experience of what I wanted to do. And so I really was looking at startups because they're a less structured environment. And so when you have an early stage startup, everybody's running around, everybody does everything and wears a bunch of hats. And so I got a job in the FP&A function at Hyperloop where I owned the financial statements for the company. but it was all forward looking, not backwards looking like accounting. And so
Right.
by being forward looking, owning budgets, working with the teams on spend and all of that, I eventually was able to gain enough experience and credibility in the company where I could start having opinions on how we spend the money rather than just tracking the budget. And so by having that experience of how, it allowed me to have enough skills and experience to eventually convert that into a strategy and operations job at Meta.
Okay. So now you go to Meta.
Yep.
This is a big one. I think talked about this a little bit in terms of some very recognizable companies with some very recognizable founders. Meta would certainly fit that category. And you didn't just go there. You spent 4.5 years there. So, you know, that's not an insignificant amount of time, particularly at a company like that that's been in very high growth. And so a lot of high movement, a very active company. You started out um, in a strategy role there, or was there like an interim?
Yeah. So I started in a strategy and operations role, which, if I'm being 100% honest, I didn't really understand what it was as a role when I signed up. But it sounded cool and it sounded fun.
Right.
Um, and so it was only for Facebook and only for the entertainment partnerships team.
Makes
So
sense. You
this
were in
was the
LA for
team.
this?
Yeah, I was in
Yeah.
LA.
Okay. That makes sense.
So
Yep.
it, this was the team that worked with all of the celebrities and the creators for the Facebook product. And so I was responsible for setting their goals, setting their year-long strategy, and also helping them with the business operations and processes uh, to make it run smoother, alleviate work that they didn't have to do, and then a lot of stakeholder management in that process.
Neat. Neat. Not to date myself, but I didn't have a similar role, but I did work in the entertainment industry, and we closed a deal, an early deal with MySpace. That
Oh,
was a
cool.
precursor to kind of what you're describing there. It was
Totally.
at the time I worked at an online animation company, and it was a big deal for us. It was like, holy,
Totally.
we were about to explode. But but it's funny hearing you kind of go through that story. I was like, yeah, I was one of those mopes that you were talking to, or that
Yeah.
whole team.
For sure. Yeah, my primary stakeholder came from Yahoo, and I was just like, oh, I remember when that was a thing.
Right. In fact, I think if I recall at MySpace, one of the guys from Yahoo was running the entertainment area. I don't recall his name, and he was the kind of way above my pay grade. So I never connected with him. But yes, was one of those companies that had a lot of good echoes in the
For
entertainment
sure.
industry.
For
Okay,
sure.
so you're running there, and then at some point you get into the journey of you start leveling up. It sounds like you move a little beyond that. Um, TikTok. Do you want to talk about that at all, or leave it
Yeah.
alone?
So basically, while I was at Meta, after my second year, that's when TikTok really started eating our lunch,
Yep.
to say the least. And so it really became, let's call it a red alert situation of like, how do we fix this?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess my credibility as in strategy and operations was strong enough where I was selected to author the strategy on how Facebook and Instagram compete with TikTok and YouTube. Mainly TikTok, but we have to acknowledge YouTube was there too.
Right.
Um, and so I authored the strategy for the first year for the creator team specifically. Um, and then once we got it through the stakeholder rounds and approved by the C-suite, I executed it globally for 2 years with strategy updates in between, obviously. So that became a more global strategy and operations role for both of those apps, making sure that we could compete with TikTok.
All right, I got to ask. So that's absolutely amazing. One of the things I've observed just working at bigger companies is, over time, you become both somewhat institutionalized, but you also, to that company, not necessarily in a bad way, that's some of the value, but you also, because you start to know the institution and how it works really well, you have compound value that you can bring back to the organization because you're not only working on your function, in your case, strategy, but you also know how to do it within the confines of, in this case, a meta kind of environment. Um, why would you leave that? That sounds like an amazing job. And I know you left, and this is, I think, where your story starts to get really interesting.
Yeah. So I absolutely loved that job. I thought it was fascinating. It was fun. It was interesting. And the company is well resourced. So it wasn't really like begging for dollars in the same way that it was for a startup. So,
Right.
um, yeah, it was great. I really valued my time there. But what it turned into is after a couple of years of running and executing that strategy, it became kind of um, repeatable and kind of the same thing over and over. It's like the strategy, when you have a company of that size, the strategy doesn't change that much from year to year. The frameworks I was using and the general scaffolding I built was translatable. And so it became a less of a fire drill over time and more of a steady state. And I needed a new challenge and I needed something else to do. When I was looking around what else the company had going on, the month I left is the month ChatGPT became a thing.
Right.
So I didn't have the benefit of AI, but Meta was already prepping for AI in their own way. Um, Candidly, I was too unfamiliar with what AI really was and how to use it to be able to provide any value to Meta or move over to that team.
Right.
It felt like a fad to me, but like at least within that company, not in the entire market. So I knew that wasn't the way I wanted to go. And when I looked at what else was around, nothing really interested me.
Right.
So I was getting a little restless with the corporate structure as well, or a company that large.
Right.
I wanted more control. I wanted my opinion to be more heavily weighted. Um, and so the only way I was going to get there was either find a leadership position at a smaller company or start something myself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and at the time, I had no idea. Like when I was doing job market searches, again, what I was seeing wasn't really up my alley. I didn't want to just pound my head or pound the pavement for a company where I didn't truly believe in the mission or the product we were selling. Like I wanted something that was intellectually stimulating for me. So I kind of backed myself into a corner where my only option was to quit or just grit my teeth until I figured out the next move.
Right.
And I was just at the end of my patience with uh, the corporate world.
All
So
right.
I quit without a plan. And it was one of the scariest things I've ever done. Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, yeah, I still don't know that I've really ingested that move. It's been 2 years now, 3 years, something
Right.
like that.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes the, you know, making those kinds of decisions can be both empowering and to that kind of, if you're feeling some stagnation, that can be very hyper liberating. And yeah, they can be scary, and it's to use your words, it's not as well resourced as, say, staying in a big corporate environment, which is fairly to very well resourced. And so carry some different kinds of anxieties. And all right, so let's stay right there. So you make this kind of decision. Wasn't It doesn't sound at all like a rash decision. It sounds like it was a decision that um, the philosophy background help you to kind of tease this out, or different methodology? Did you rely on kind of the Anderson School of Accounting? Let me do the math. What's happening right here at this exact moment?
Yeah, this is one of the few times where I would say this was more emotional or universe driven than anything else I've ever done. I
Hmm.
was always operating in a very rational, thought out thinking mindset of like, okay, here's a plan. What's the goal? How do I like orient whatever I'm doing towards that goal? And that made sense in the corporate structure, right? That's how you move up. That's how you get your projects done.
Right.
But it actually, so I would say like end of year, I quit in February. So the end of the fall, like going into December, I was kind of restless, but like I didn't really know what I was going to do.
Okay.
And so when I got back to work in January, nothing was actually different, but everything felt very different. I kind of felt a huge pull out the door, or I guess it was a push,
Yeah.
let's say.
Right. Just a call.
Like everything, all the projects I was working on, all the interactions I was having, everything was kind of emotionally and universally stacking up of like, okay, you just can't be here anymore. And I really felt this like universal push of you just got to leave the company. Don't worry about it. Take the like plunge. Um, and so this is one of the only times I actually met with like a spiritual advisor.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, like what's actually going on right now because this is wild and like this is not something I'm used to. And so she did one of these Akashic record readings where she like contacted my spirit guides and all of that. And the whole message was basically like, just take the jump, you'll be fine, we'll catch you, don't worry about it, just quit. And so
Huh.
obviously I didn't do it in that moment, but I
Right.
took a couple weeks and like let it sit and like I don't know, things really started stacking up where it was like I just cannot be here anymore. So I eventually just pulled the ripcord and just went on the journey.
Right. Stacking up, or you're looking for things to stack?
It was stacking up. It was
Yeah.
like the ground around me was shifting in such a way that I was no longer comfortable being there.
Right.
And it wasn't anything like bad. Like
No,
I
I
said,
get
like
that. It
things were
was you.
mostly the
You were.
same.
It sounds
Yeah.
like you were driving it, not
Yeah.
the
And
organization. Yep.
totally. And so it was just like I did it, and then once I had a couple, like it took me a month to decompress. But I think the most interesting thing to me was after I had a couple months of distance, I really saw how much of a difference working in a company and the corporate ladder was than like the life I could be leading. And this kind
Right.
of goes back to the LA thing is like
Right.
now I had that non-traditional schedule that I saw everybody else having. I wasn't making an income, but it was a non-traditional schedule.
Right.
And I saw what the difference in quality of life really was. And having spent the last, I don't know, 15 years at that point, um, always working towards trying to get to the C-suite, go up the corporate ladder, big corporations, I hadn't seen what outside that bubble truly was.
Right.
And so when I'm sitting on the beach on a Tuesday afternoon trying to figure my life out, the only thing that it really taught me at that moment was I don't want to go back to corporate. So that was a decision that anytime I thought about doing it, thought about looking for a job, I got a really visceral reaction and I still do. And so it shifted from like, what do I want to do with my career to how do I create a life where I don't have to work in a corporate environment anymore?
Okay. So let's talk about that. So you know this. You're sitting there. You haven't figured out what the path is, but you know what the path is not. It sounds like.
Yeah.
And at this point, you I'm gathering you're a pretty active diver.
Yep.
And so you have this journey with ScubaZen, is that a side detour, or is that kind of the first steps in the next kind of journey for you at the moment? What are you thinking right there? And maybe we could just take a half step back and maybe you can share with folks what is ScubaZen.
Yeah. So I'm an active scuba diver. It's been a hobby of mine for many years. And one of the issues I always had when I was diving is so it's common practice to keep track of your dives in a dive log. because it contains valuable information that you can use in the future.
Right.
And also it's a fun little record of everywhere you've been. And so when I was looking for mobile apps to help me just keep track of my dive log, they were all garbage, realistically. To the point where like most divers just don't even bother keeping a log because the experience is so bad.
Right.
And many years ago when I was thinking this, like I wanted to build my own app, but I have no software engineering capability. So I had no way of doing that.
Right.
And I didn't want to hire somebody and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this. So it's always kind of been sitting on the sideline. But now ChatGPT and AI is coming around in popularity. I'm sitting on the beach with nothing to do and no direction. So, kind of as a hobby and just a learning experience, I was like, okay, let's mess around with this. Let's see if I can build it myself now that
Right.
AI can do the coding, because I can think through architecture and learn software engineering architecture through YouTube videos. So that's exactly what I did. I spent a couple months just watching YouTube videos. I found a low code front end designer, and then I just Claude coded my way through building an app that I would have found useful for scuba diving. And then what I added to it was when I go on an international dive trip, there's a lot of logistics required, like keeping track of your packing list, your equipment maintenance, like figuring out what wetsuit you need, how much weight you need. And it's a really fragmented and messy system that
Right.
doesn't have anything to help you coordinate. Because there's nothing worse than showing up at a dive site and realizing you forgot something important. Because you're in the middle of
Cantina.
the ocean at that point,
Right.
you're stuck. Um, so I added all of that in and again, this was just so I could use this. And then, but what I wanted to learn through that was what does it actually take to launch an app, get it through the approvals, but also how do you market it? What
Right.
does paid advertising look like? What does social media content look like? And working at Meta, it was always easy for me in the sense of I had a team that I was like, okay, I need you to hit these goals. This is the philosophy. Like, go do that. Let me know
Right.
how it goes. Let's talk about it. But actually putting pen to paper and owning it is a completely different
Right. It's
experience.
a beast.
It's not easy. And so it really taught me a lot about like, okay, what does go to market actually look like from a motion standpoint instead of me sitting in the ivory tower.
Yep.
And so that was a big learning experience, and it's still a side project for me. I still develop it a little bit, add features here and there.
Right. Do you think, let me kind of push back on that and ask you a different question. Do you think having that ivory tower view, particularly from that particular ivory tower, or let's just call it a tech ivory tower if we want to be broad and generic, do you think that gave you the confidence to go to Claude? Or do you think you could have done that on your own if you had, say, stayed at Anderson for 15 years and said, now I have the same kind of moment in my life and I'm done with this and
Yeah, I would say that it actually gave me the confidence because what it
right,
allowed me to do is actually put the strategies and structured thinking to the test in market and see how it performed and how it worked. How did people within the company respond to it who also have a wealth of business knowledge and provided feedback? And it really helped me hone the skill set of building strategies and running strategies from an implementation standpoint, where when I started with ScubaZen, I just went through the same exercise I went through as Meta. I built the strategy, I built the frameworks, I built the go to market, and like I had the canonical doc I needed. But the hard part, well, I knew that strategy would be at least semi fruitful. I knew that there would be adjustments, but no big deal.
right,
The hard part was I didn't have anyone to hand that document to.
right.
So
You're the team.
And so now I'm receiving the document that I just wrote, and I'm like, what the hell do I do
Those
with
are
this?
horrible requirements.
Yeah, like, what
What
was
kind of
this guy
clown wrote these
thinking?
things?
So then I was like, all right, like now I gotta actually learn how to do this. And that was more of a struggle than I thought it would be. And like it became a lot of which people do I hire for? What can I learn? And like, I remember when I first started the marketing journey, I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. Like, I'll do some image generation, I'll do some posts, and like, you
Right.
can schedule posts in advance. And then like, after like the first 2 days, I was like, this is way too much work. There's no way I can figure this out in like an efficient fashion. I just need to hire someone.
Right.
But through hiring someone, uh, I actually learned a lot through that experience as well because I saw what she was doing, how she was thinking about it because I had to approve her social media strategies and like get an understanding of like what it really took on the ground. But other parts too, like I just took ownership of and I was like, okay, I got to figure this out for myself. Like perfect example is SEO optimization. Like went to a bunch of panels, went to a bunch of classes, or YouTube videos, I guess are the classes, and like tried to learn what I could. And
Right.
I think I got like 80% of the way there and got it functionally and working. So I didn't need to spend thousands on an expert. So it was a little give and take.
That makes sense. So at that point, you're you're running this thing, you're building this thing. I assume you're not making much in the way of money on ScubaZen.
$0.
Zero, but you're learning in public, and so that
Yeah.
certainly justifies a lot of the investment. Um, and that now you're still looking for what this thing is, though, it sounds like. At the
Yeah. So,
Just
yeah.
real quick, at the time, so you're now you've left this big organization, the bluest of blue chips. You're now doing a scuba app, which I think, what's your community sharing back with you at this time? What's happening in your kind of environment? Because I think this is one of those areas that a lot of people don't realize how much strength is required at this exact moment. And maybe
Yeah.
your
And
life
like,
was different. I don't know, but go ahead.
yeah, I think this one is a good example of like shooting myself in the foot by default because this app is as a user base, people are only going to use it once or twice a year because that's the frequency of when like my target users go on a trip and like go
Right.
on dives and stuff like that. So it's not like I could be tracking daily active users or monthly active users like I can with most apps and then like try to get feedback from these people. It was a lot of like, I'm going to have to wait 2 or 3 years to get any valuable feedback
Right.
because they
What's my
need to use it a
retention rate
couple
here?
times. Let's see if they actually come back after a year. So it became a situation where I was like, okay, as much as I like to dream that this could make a lot of money and like I still have a go to market plan I haven't launched yet to like try to actually push
Right.
it further. I was like, practically speaking, I'm not, this is not going to be my moneymaker. I need to figure literally anything else out. But this bonus is it gave me the confidence of like, okay, now I know software engineering enough to build and launch something and market. I don't need to hire a software engineer. Let's start thinking about practical business applications of this new skill.
All right. So let's talk about that. So now you're here. You got practical business application idea. You may not know what the practical business application is quite yet. Sounds like you're spending time on the beach trying to figure that out. Um, what's the discovery of that look like? Is it eureka, or is it just like a series of steps before you kind of land on StratEngine?
Yeah, it was. So I built one more app after ScubaZen, and that was mostly just so I could learn how a new database structure worked. But it failed fantastically in market. I think I had one consistent user, um, which honestly was even shocking to me. But so I killed that one off. But then it became like, okay, consumer. I had a bunch of other consumer app ideas, but I was reading this article about how there's this one guy based out of Asia or the Middle East or something, and all he was doing was building Chrome browser apps for B2B applications, and he was making money hand over fist. And the takeaway from the article was like, if you want to actually build a sustainable business as like a one person, B2C is a much tougher play than it is in B2B.
Right.
So that reframed my thinking of like, okay, if I'm not doing B2C and I were to do B2B, how would I do this and what would I build? And so the accounting and finance background, I just didn't want to go back to it. That was just a personal decision more than anything.
Right. That's
So
fair.
I thought about my time at Meta, and I was like, okay, I see what AI can do. I see the processing power it has. I also see all of its shortcomings. What would I have wanted at Meta in order to make my job easier and faster? And is that something I can actually sell in the market? And so it started as a really half baked idea. And like when I had it in my notes as like a half baked idea, I didn't actually think it was a good idea. But then, like, when I actually started going through my frameworks and building out the strategy and the go to market and the value prop, it actually revealed to be like quite an interesting idea and something that I really thought had legs. So eventually I just pulled the trigger and was like, okay, I need to dedicate myself and do an initial build. I'll time box 6 months. And if I can get market validation on the idea and a prototype in the market, that'll tell me whether this is worth pursuing and expanding or if I need to figure something else out. And luckily, I'm still doing it over a year later, so it had enough legs, let's say that.
Awesome. Just going back on one piece there. Mention you went back in your notes. Are you a regular note taker?
Yeah, I write down, I have a lot of random ideas pop in my head. And so I've just becoming more forgetful over time. So I started trying to practice to write them down and like I'm not very good about keeping all of my notes in one app. They're kind of scattered all over the place.
Right.
So I created like a business note somewhere in my phone that like I just start jotting down ideas. Um, and so that one I was reviewing when I was going through this exercise.
Well, that could be your next business idea. Note Zen.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, that's unbelievable. All of it. It's a really neat story. Um, I guess just kind of tying off on this. So you're in this journey. You're kind of it's pretty fascinating. I guess more than one question, but AI in general. How do you create in an AI economy? Um, is pretty fascinating, and I assume it's moves pretty quickly in terms of the competitive landscape because you're competing with potential competitors, but you're also competing with large language models that maybe don't specialize in, say, whatever your specialty is, in your case strategy, but they offer it um, in some ways. And so how do you deal with the stress of that? I'm not going to ask you about the business per se, but some of the anxiety around, this is what the environment is. How do you stay comfortable? How do you stay balanced? Um, how do you find your way, I guess?
Yeah, I think for me, it was realizing that like this AI wave is full on the Wild West. Like I was always nervous for the first 6 months of doing this. I was really nervous that I was behind, or because I didn't have a software engineering background, I didn't really understand what I needed to build legitimate software. And so then it was Tech Week in LA, and I made sure to go to both the business panels and the engineering panels
Right.
just to see the difference in how they're talking about it, what they're thinking about. And the big realization that I had was nobody knows anything. Everybody everybody's just guessing. Everybody's trying to figure it out. And like, what was funny is all the engineering side were just like straight out with it. They're like, we really don't know. We're trying to figure it out. All the
Right.
business people were sitting around pretending they had it figured out and like pretending they knew the answer, but like we're being completely contradicted by the engineering side. And I was like, okay, these guys don't know anything either. And I think that actually gave me a lot of confidence is that if these people at the biggest tech companies in the world or these successful businesses are out here saying, hey, we have no idea how this works. We're doing a lot of experimentation and figuring it out.
Right.
What's my experimentation or methodology any different than anyone else's? So, and I think the insight that I really had was from my business school days of it was a lot of, all right, you guys are the business side. If you want to create a company, you need to find an engineering co-founder and you need to come up with an idea and the two of you together run the company.
Right.
But now that I can build software myself, I can be that other co-founder. And AI is in such an early state right now where a lot of the utility that people are finding with it are really on the development and implementation side. A lot of people aren't thinking so much about the business side and like what their use cases are. I mean, as time goes on, more and more people are. So like that's a dwindling insight. But if I could position myself as somebody who understands the business needs but can develop it myself and bridge that gap, that's a unique value proposition that a lot of founders don't have. And again, like I'm guessing just as much as anyone else. So I might as well just throw it out there and see what lands and rely on my experience and ability to take feedback and adjust and my execution prowess.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I think I love that idea. I've encountered that at different points in my life of understanding either I know nothing, so by definition, I'm perfect because I'm going to get it wrong no matter what. I can go, it's perfect. Or everybody else knows as much as I do, which is kind of fascinating. That seems to be some of
Yeah.
your observation. And the other piece I think was really interesting, and what you just shared was this idea of from a tech startup perspective, this concept of having a a committee of founders that kind of all have these complementary skills, and instead maybe leaning on the fact that some of these skills are starting to get co-opted and you can committee some of your founders through customized engines. It's really interesting to see how that's going to impact things.
Yeah, and like I think like the part that I'm most intellectually interested in from running a business is really the business operations side of it of now that AI agents are more and more prominent, you can build agents to accomplish a lot of the tasks that you would normally have to hire someone for.
Right.
So it's no longer I have to zero sum find time to do this. Now I can just delegate tasks to an AI agent to take care of it for me. And that really increases productivity.
Right. And it also increases swings,
Yeah, for sure.
the number that you can take. Okay. So, final question on this topic. Are you having fun?
I'm having a lot of fun. I'm engaged. I'm working a ton, but at least it doesn't feel like work like it did when I was in a corporate environment.
Right.
And being able to set my own schedule and do things that interest me is really where I feel I should be, and I'm very happy right now.
Awesome. All right. So, I guess the final segment of today, we have I guess, a signature segment here on the show called the Flip Story Recipe Book. And I invite all the guests, including now you, to share maybe some insights, some key ingredients, a method, an outcome of some kind that they just want to kind of leave the audience with. So, Eric, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I would say that the most important thing is perseverance and persistence. Um, to me, the way I've always executed projects or executed whatever I was doing was always starting with a vision of what I wanted it to be and then backing all the way up to today to figure out what I have to do to get there. You'll expose a lot of problems. And what I noticed is a lot of people will encounter those problems and see them as blockers when they're just sub things to solve in order to continue on that journey. And people are going to have tons of opinions about your journey and where you want to go. Um, so this is where the philosophy comes in: is you need to take those inputs and figure out what's the credibility of the person feedback? Is that feedback even relevant to what you want to do?
Right.
Um, is it coming from a place of fear? Is it coming from a place of excitement? Whatever it is. And whether you include that feedback or not is your own assessment. But if you persevere and maintain your vision and maintain the path and just keep going, then you'll ultimately be successful. I think a lot of people think about this journey as if I do X, the result will be Y, when really it's more similar to planting a garden in the sense of you need to throw a bunch of seeds out there, see what grows, work on a path while things are growing, and see what comes back and bears fruit. But you got to just keep going, set aside the fear, set aside the expectations, and just believe in yourself and believe in the vision.
I love it. I love it. And by the way, just related to that, I've encountered a lot of different folks with a lot of different concepts. There seems to be a category of people that consistently talk about kind of how to with a garden mindset versus a hunter mindset. I think that's really fascinating. So,
Yeah, it's interesting.
yeah. All right. Well, that was just unbelievable. The whole thing. This was so fun. I want to just say thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing. How do people find you?
Yeah, so you can email me directly at eric@stratengineai.com, ERIC, or stratengineai.com is my website. I have a contact form in there.
All right. I'll put some links in the show notes as well. So with that, I just again want to say thank you, Eric. That was just that was pretty fascinating, pretty awesome. Wish you well as you kind of continue to go on the journey here, and certainly excited to see how all things continue to mature for you. And with that, I'm David Darian, and this is the Flip Story, and we'll see you next time. All right, bye everyone.